Today we're looking at Foretales, a game that offers many paths to victory with a lot of fun along the way. Tune in as we take a deeper dive into this story-driven card game here on Legendary Tactics.
All right, Cax. So you have had this game Foretales for a little while, and
Yes.
you've been playing it a fair bit.
I have given it a good run so far. I've and really been enjoying myself. I should say right from the onset.
That's great. So what is it? What's it all about?
Yeah, so Foretales, it's you start with choosing. You're presented all these different scenarios, and you choose you choose the scenario you want to go into, and then there's a very specific object with that scenario, and then in the scenario you're given all these cards that come across the screen, and basically it kind of reminds me of like almost like time stories, the board game.
Oh,
Time
really?
Stories. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you kind of decide which picture you want to, or which area of the game you want to tackle there within the scenario, and then you have to use cards and you have cards in hand and what have you to sort of defeat that particular scenario checkpoint, and then a new one is refreshed. So there's this constant cycling, and the whole while you're trying to sort of meet the objective to that particular scenario.
Okay. And is it? I saw a little bit of the footage. Is it like an animal game? Like, is it?
Yeah. So
is
they're
that kind of the-
like the animal. There is a lot of animal caricatures. So you start off actually with there's a lion whose name is Leo the lion, of course.
Of course.
And then you have another one, Volpane, and I think it's like a stork kind of looking character. So it's kind of like a bit of a fantasy edge to it. But what I actually do like about that aspect is that these characters have very specific character traits about them, and so then as you're going and fighting against different enemies, you want to consider the traits and the cards that each of those characters bring with them, and how you're going to tackle beating them. Right, so that's because the enemies do come up on those cards I mentioned, the time story kind of cards.
Yeah.
Enemies will appear on those cards where you have to actually go in and then do battle with those enemies using your cards, and using actually, as you go along too, you collect food and fame and money and this thing called Grim, which you actually use as sort of like capital that you can use to spend against fighting those enemies, beating different cards, and so you can use that as well as your card hand. So.
And it tells a story.
Yeah, so it's got a great narrative story as you're going along, it took maybe a scenario or two for me to sort of really get into it, and then I was actually finding myself getting further and further immersed into the scenario, which is, I think, an amazing quality about the game.
Oh, neat.
So
yeah. So what would you say about this game as far as maybe summing it up, or I don't know, what do you like best, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things I really do like is it is 100% choose your own adventure. Besides the fact that basically you're given two characters to start with, that's about it. They basically say, here's two characters, here's like 4 or 5 or 6 scenarios to choose from. Go, right?
Okay.
And so you've got to sort of there's a really good training tutorial at the beginning, and so you just jump right into it. And what I really like is that with each of the scenarios too, if you hover on it, it'll kind of give you a hint. It'll say, okay, here's what's happening. Like, I'll give you one example. So I went into the prisoner scenario. And it sort of suggested, hey, look, your buddy Leo has been imprisoned, and you've got to bust him out of prison fast. And that's kind of what, and that's sort of your clue. Okay, well, that's what I'm doing in this scenario, right?
Yeah.
So, so I thought that was pretty neat. I think the choose your own adventure aspect, you pick. You pick the scenario, you pick once you get into the scenario, you pick which action cards you want to go and tackle. You pick which cards you want to use to tackle those different pictures, right?
Yeah.
And then I find that the story really draws you in.
Nice.
The game itself kind of draws you in, and even the scenarios can draw you in. You start I recall the last one, the last scenario I played, it took about 4 or 5 kicks at the can there to finally crack the code.
So they get harder.
Oh yeah, the scale on it is really well done. They really scale the complexity nicely.
Nice.
One thing I should mention too is as you're going along the scenario, and this is another of the kind of the neat parts of this game, you come across new characters, which are sometimes characters you are permanently you're that come along with you for other scenarios. Some are just scenario characters that stay in that scenario that you can use, say when you have to fight some enemies off.
Yeah.
You're also given artifacts. You're given different like potions and things like that to heal yourself up, and card abilities. You're given card abilities too. All of a sudden, one of the last scenarios I played, actually at the very end, it said, "Oh, here's a new card ability for you, for your character." So actually, there's a lot of like points in this game where I was like, "Hey, that's kind of a bit of like a Gloomhaven light feel to it."
Oh, interesting.
So
yeah. Cool.
I definitely don't think it's like the complexity of Gloomhaven as far as the scenario depth. I don't. Maybe it does. Maybe there's more beyond there's 30 that I can see right off the hop.
Yeah.
Now you're not given all 30 right away. You have to unlock as you go. But
yeah. Well, was there anything you didn't like as much?
So there's a lot that really caught my eye, and then there was this one particular feature really kind of it got me early, and then I sort of started to live with it, and that was the fact that some of they'll have character conversations back and forth within the game.
Yeah.
And it's all text box. And so I started reading it, and you have to click when you're done reading that particular text box, and then another one will pop up with this little popping sound of a new box, coming onto the screen, and it would kind of go back and forth for a fair bit. Sometimes these conversations would go on, 5 or 6 or 7 back and forths, and then I started realizing they don't really, add to the, the importance of the whole story. Sometimes they did, but a lot of times they didn't. And so I thought, maybe that was probably one area where I thought, maybe we cut back on that a bit, or you find a way if they could find a way to maybe shorten that down or streamline that part where you can, choose to skip conversation if you don't feel it's going to be,
Yeah, sometimes those conversations in those kind of games are just they don't add enough value to.
Yeah, I felt it was like
maybe
filler.
while the game's loading or something like that, but not that that's an issue these days. But
I think in the defense, 100%. And I think in the defense of what they're doing there, I mean, it is character building in some ways, right? So you're kind of getting, because they kind of talk with the characters, kind of like a colloquial character, or like how that the character would talk, or how they envisioned it would talk, and so you start getting kind of more like character building, but. Sometimes I just wanted to play the game, and I wasn't. That was very much a secondary, part of what I wanted to do in the game.
Yeah. Now you said there are 30 scenarios, and like how many? And they unlock basically as the game goes on, I assume. So
yeah.
So what are the characters that you play with then? We said there were some
so you had Leo the Lion, and you had Volpain, and then you'll have so I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but I will say that I did come across another character to join our crew who was Karst, who was an ape. And as I mentioned earlier, so each of the characters have different kind of attributes. So like Leo the Lion was a marauder, and it gives you a little backstory. You could click on Leo, and it'll give you a little backstory. And then Volpain was a street thief, and this newest character that I've just come across, Karst, he's an ape who, as it says, likes to settle things with force. So you kind of get a sense for, and it also kind of offers insight into the character's cards as well, I think. And those are the kinds of cards you're going to get dealt to and have in your hand, right? So.
Yeah. Wow.
So
who would you recommend this game? Who's this game for?
So I've been doing a fair bit of thinking on this, and I think if you like sandbox games, if you like having to solve like scenario puzzles specifically, because every scenario kind of offers its own set of puzzles. And sometimes even within a scenario, there'll be multiple scenarios that you have to kind of go through, sort of steps to go through to even finish that one scenario. So if you like the scenario puzzle, if you enjoy a good narrative, if you like character development and that kind of thing, and adding new characters into the mix, then I think you are really going to you're going to really enjoy this game. And I think the last caveat would be that if you're willing, if you are willing to skip through sometimes less than compelling dialogue boxes, that's
yes, that's really got in your craw.
Well, a little bit, it was a little bit. It wasn't after till maybe about 3 or 4 hours in where I kept, it was almost the pinging noise of these boxes going back and forth. Right, there's just the sound and it was often I just actually found myself skip, right. To get through.
Yeah,
so
you don't get any value out of them.
No, I found it. So that was probably the biggest drawback.
Yeah. All right. So overall, though, you'd recommend this game?
Overall, 100%, I would recommend this game. I just went on to Steam this evening, and it was listed for $22.79 Canadian. Yeah. And so I mean, like I said, sandbox, scenario built, puzzles, narratives, and character development, if you like those things in a game, if you enjoyed time stories, or if you enjoyed Gloomhaven, and maybe you don't mind a lighter version of it and card driven, you won't be sorry for the purchase.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, and if anyone has given this a try, please feel free to comment down below, and we'll see you here next time
on Legendary Tactics.